Good morning. I'd like to thank everybody who took time out of their busy day today to attend our annual tribute to 911 and the people who perished on that horrible day. I would like to first go ahead and introduce, for the invocation, Chaplain Kelvin Foster from North River Fire District.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chaplain Kelvin Foster, Chaplain of the North River Fire Department. It is indeed an honor to be a participant in this program on this solemn occasion. 911, for years, those numbers simply meant a call for help. Now they also remind us of September 11th, 2001, the date of the worst terrorist attack on the United States of America and one of the deadliest days on American soil. Today marks the 17th event in memorial of that occasion. In October 2001, the United States Congress passed a joint resolution designating every September 11th be observed as Patriot Day. The resolution requests that the United States government entities and interested organizations and individuals display the flag at half-staff on Patriots Day. Will you please pray with me? God, our refuge and strength, we turn to you for peace and security. We recall the 9/11 attacks, and we thank you for the bravery and the sacrifice of those who served as light firefighters, rescue crews, or people aboard Flight 93, and the many other responders who answered the call for help. I thank you for the courage displayed by those who, instead of thinking of their own safety, rushed in to help others. Comfort and strengthen the family and friends of those who died. Give healing and patience to the survivors. We ask that you would also provide continued physical, or for those who are dealing with physical and psychological pain. May those who survive feel gratitude and not guilt. Assure each person whose life was changed forever your protection and strength. Dispel nightmares, silence any anxiety, and may we learn to depend on the security you offer. Gracious God, our world changed with 9/11 attacks. We have seen how easily buildings can fall and how quickly lives can end. As we remember 9/11, may we be reminded us that you are our only true security. Give us your strength to face the memory of those attacks and to change lives as a result. Give us your compassion to help each other and recognize needs around the world. Give us your hope for the future and for the uncertain, and give us your peace. And finally, Lord, as this nation prepares for the potential storms that looms offshore and any unseen dangers that may lie ahead, I pray that as we leave this solemn place of remembrance, that you will continue to bless us and as bearers of your goodwill. Bless all those who served in uniform under the flag of the United States, our allies, and please, Lord, help us bless the United States of America. In your name I pray. Amen.
Next, I would like to introduce Mayor Shirley Gruber Bryant from the City of Palmetto.
I'm very honored to be here today, and I'm so pleased to see so many in attendance. As we remember the tragedies of September 11, 2018, it's critical that the memories and realities that changed us forever not be lost with us. Our youth must continue to be taught the history of our great nation and its history and its heroes before, during, and after this horrific day in 2001. We must never allow it to be forgotten, lest it be allowed to repeat itself. We must insist as a group that America's history has a strong presence in our educational system. We must also be vigilant. As has often been said, you must know where you have been to guide where you are going. Thank you for being here today, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Mayor Wayne Poston, City of Bradenton.
Good morning, everyone. To echo what Shirley said, thank you for being here. You know, a lot of counties and municipalities have quit doing this kind of remembrance. It's gotten away from some of them. But as we did the first one, I told you at that time, we're never going to forget on my watch to do this remembrance here. All the speakers will tell you about what happened on that day. And one of the reasons we are continuing to do this is that a lot of the folks that were involved in that, when those civilians were coming out of those towers, the Brotherhood was going in. People were running from danger. Our folks ran toward danger. And 17 years out from those terrorist attacks, nearly 10,000 first responders and others who were in the World Trade Center have been diagnosed with cancer. More than 2,000 deaths have been attributed to 911 illnesses. It will get worse. By 2018, many expect that more people would have died from their toxic exposure from 9/11 than were killed on that terrible Tuesday. The average age of a 911 first responder is now about 55. While many people face a cancer diagnosis as they age, the rate of some cancers among first responders is up to 30% higher than the general population. In 2017, 23 current or former members of the New York City Police Department died of 911 related diseases. That's the same number of NYPD members that perished on September 11th. The FDNY lost a stunning 343 members on September 11th, 2001. Since then, line of duty deaths linked to 911 are approaching 180 people. Well over half lost on the day of the attacks. So many have died since the attacks that last year a new tablet had to be added to the Hall of Heroes at One Police Plaza to accommodate all the names of those fallen. So we're still losing people. Those of you who have not visited the memorial where the Twin Towers used to stand, you really ought to do that. It is a life-changing experience. And in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, they just put up a new tower there, remembering those 40 people who died when they took over that airplane. Many think we're going to the White House or the Capitol. They decided this is not going to happen, and those 40 people rushed the cockpit, crashed the plane, knowing full well they were not going to survive. So there is a new memorial there that just went up this year. It's a wind chime tower, absolutely stunning. So let's all remember what happened there and keep the faith in the Brotherhood. Thank you.
Representative Jim Boyd.
Like the mayors, I am grateful and honored as well to be here this morning, and thank you for the invitation, Chief. Like many of you, I stood in disbelief 17 years ago. I was in my office. I remember it like it was yesterday. My wife called and said, "You better turn the TV on." I said, "What's going on?" She said, just turned the TV on. A bunch of us in our office crowded around in the conference room. The first tower had been hit. We were watching as the second tower was hit, and the other events unfolded after that, and we just stood there in horror. We could not imagine what was going on in our great country. And as bad as that was and horrific as that was, let me tell you what I remember about that day. I remember immediately after that happened, men and women like those in uniform here today rushed into harm's way to try to save those that were still alive and protect those that who knows what was coming next. So you all are truly the heroes of that day, and you're still the heroes today. Thank you for that service. Sadly, we can't change the events of that day, but what we can do, as the mayor said, we can remember this day every day from now on. And those of you that have brought young people here today, God bless you. Thank you, because our young people need to understand the gravity of that day and what it meant to America. But as Americans, we united, we're resilient, we rebuilt. We built a memorial in New York, and this morning will be dedicated in Shanksville to remember that bad day. This morning, in closing, I would like to again thank you. Some of you that were there in New York that day, some of you went after the event and gave of your time and your service. You saw things that you probably never dreamed you would see, but you were there to protect people like me and my family, and we are forever grateful. We must never forget, and we will never forget. Thank you.
If we could have Adam Willis from Bayside Church for our national anthem.
Will you stand with me? Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last streaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
At this point in our program, we'd like to start introducing our individual speakers. Edward Cleveland, Fire Chief, retired, West Manatee Fire Rescue. Sir?
Thank you, Chief Rapino. It's always an honor to talk with my brothers, and we've got a message for you and for all of you. 17 years ago, at this moment in time, as we sit here today along the Manatee River and in front of the memorial that honors the fallen from Manatee County, a horror that none of us could have ever imagined was unfolding in New York City, and was about to unfold in Washington, D.C., and in a farmer's field in Pennsylvania. On that horrible day, 2,966 people perished. There were 246 killed on the aircraft used in those despicable attacks. 2,606 people were killed in the World Trade Center or on the ground. And in Washington, D.C., 125 people died. When I stand in front of the names of America's fallen firefighters, heroes, at the National Fallen Firefighter Memorial in Emmitsburg, Maryland at the National Fire Academy, it always takes my breath away. When I look at the different years with far too many names on them, 113, 103, 91, 77, and then I come to 2001, and there are the names of 446 firefighters. 446 firefighters who died doing what firefighters do, taking care of their communities. One of those was our own West Manatee firefighter, Brian Reed. And of course, included there are the names of the 343 who died at the World Trade Center 17 years ago right now. To stand before that memorial and reflect upon the sacrifices of those heroes is awe-inspiring. And we must never forget. But today, New York is approaching a terrible milestone. Nearly 10,000 people have suffered cancers linked to the toxic dust and smoke at Ground Zero. With the 17th anniversary of the September 11, 2001 terror attacks approaching, the Federal World Trade Center Health Program has counted 9,795 first responders, downtown workers, residents, students, and others with cancers deemed 9/11 related. In all, more than 1,700 responders and others affected have died, including 420 of those stricken with cancer. Sadly, we are approaching the fact that more people will have died from diseases contracted at the World Trade Center than died on 9/11. 9/11 is still killing, said John Field, an advocate for World Trade Center responders. Sadly, this fragile community of heroes and survivors is shrinking by the day. It's estimated that some 70,000 people are carrying some disease directly related to being at, near, or working at the recovery in New York City on 9/11. The number of cancer patients has rapidly risen since the federal program started tracking the disease in 2013. We get these referrals 15 to 20 times a week, said Dr. Michael Crane, the medical director of the World Trade Center Health Program at Mount Sinai Hospital. The increase is not surprising. Cancers have various latency periods, typically emerging years after exposure to harmful substances. In addition, the average age of Ground Zero workers and others affected has risen from 38 to 55. Some are in their 70s. In an aging population, you're going to see a rising cancer rate, no matter what, Crane said. But epidemiology studies have confirmed that 9/11 rescue and recovery workers have significantly higher rates of thyroid cancer and skin melanoma, which is potentially fatal, than found in the general population. And they face a higher risk of bladder cancer. Non-responders have had a significantly higher rate of breast cancer and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Cancers raising red flags include leukemia and other blood cell disorders. The growing tally of lost 9/11 heroes include FDNY firefighter John McNamara, who died of colon cancer at age 44. There are firefighters like Roy Pfeiffer, 59, and John McKee, 49, a top City University New York official who joined the search and rescue efforts. The living cancer victims face an ongoing struggle. When the first plane struck, then NYPD Sergeant Tom Wilson raced from the 90th Precinct in Brooklyn to man the Williamsburg Bridge as people fled Manhattan on foot. In the coming months, Wilson worked 344 hours at Ground Zero, sometimes sleeping at the site. And then worked at the Fresh Kills landfill, where workers sifted debris for remains. Wilson soon developed gastrointestinal and sinus problems, but was struck with an aggressive tongue cancer in 2008. Memorial Sloan Kettering doctors cut off a third of Wilson's tongue, replacing it with a skin graft from his wrist. 6 weeks of head and neck radiation damaged blood vessels in his jaw, causing it to slowly deteriorate. Now in frequent pain, Wilson will eventually need a reconstructed jaw using a bone from his leg or shoulder. But the father of 5 who left NYPD for Suffolk County Police closer to home is grateful to be alive and has not lost his passion for public service. He said, "I'd probably go out on disability, but working is my therapy. It helps me. God forbid there's another 9/11. I want to be able to respond to that." And then there's Debbie Morales, then a 23-year-old receptionist for the National Coffee Association. She stepped out of the subway to mayhem as the Twin Towers burned. "There are things I saw I can never undo," she said, sobbing. Over the next few weeks, Morales spent hours at a time in her wrecked office retrieving paperwork for colleagues. "I had dust all over me." 8 years later, Morales noticed she could not understand what a TV reporter was saying. Then she suffered 2 seizures at work. She was diagnosed with advanced brain cancer and underwent an 8-hour surgery to remove most of a tumor from her brain. Married and hoping to have kids, Morales delayed chemotherapy to go through a process to harvest and freeze some of her eggs, but complications blocked the procedure, crushing her dreams. She said, "I'm fearful about everything since 9/11. I was never like that before. I feel that thing just took everything away." Today, firefighters will respond to calls for emergencies here in Manatee County and around this country. And they will do it understanding that they are putting their lives on the line again and again, regardless of whether it's in New York City or Manatee County or in any city, USA. Firefighters will respond when the bell rings because that's what firefighters do. I want to share one last reminder with my brother and sister firefighters here today. One of the best things we can do to honor those who gave and who continue to suffer from the impacts of 9/11 is to ensure that we do what we can do to never have to deal with those horrible diseases by doing all we can to prepare and protect ourselves. For our brothers who died on 9/11, we salute you. And for those first responders and survivors that today suffer from the illnesses that the debris from the collapse of the Twin Towers caused, and for those first responders who have died from those ailments, you too are in our thoughts and prayers. 9/11 didn't end on September 11th, 2001. It didn't end for those there that day, for those that worked in the recovery efforts in the weeks that followed, for those that worked at their regular jobs in the area. And it doesn't end for us here today. Some will suffer with diabolical diseases, some with memories they will never be able to escape, and some from the reminder that our country and its citizens were attacked and murdered. May God bless those who gave their lives in the attempt to save others. And may God bless those who are struggling with the after effects of the illnesses brought on by working in the debris of Ground Zero. And may God bless all of our firefighters, wherever they serve, as they respond to calls for assistance. And may God bless America. You've heard it said before, and you will hear it many times again today and in the days to come. Never forget.
Next, I could bring up the Chief of Police, City of Palmetto, Scott Tyler.
Good morning. I'd like to talk to you this morning about legacies. A legacy is defined as something that's passed on from one generation to the next. Our lives are filled with many legacies of one sort or another. Some legacies are cherished keepsakes, like a badge, or a service ribbon, or a photograph. Other legacies are respected institutions, like cornerstone businesses, libraries, and national monuments. Many of our fondest legacies are memories of good times, warm thoughts of loved ones here and gone, and the labors and efforts of those that touch our lives and communities. On this 17th anniversary of the day evil tried and failed to defeat our nation, I can't help but think about the many legacies of September 11, 2001. Since that fateful day, all public safety disciplines have undergone a major reevaluation of how they serve and protect the public. Procedures have been established here in Manatee County and across the nation for police, fire, EMS, and rescue disciplines to work together more effectively during times of crisis. New communication protocols have been established to allow seamless communication for local and regional first responders. Different public safety disciplines now meet regularly to plan for and train for the unthinkable. Fusion centers have been established to sort through, evaluate, and disseminate critical information. Emergency response has truly evolved to be more effective today than it was ever in the past. More effective public safety is one legacy of 9/11. Much like the attack on Pearl Harbor, the events of September 11, 2001 remind us that we are not invulnerable or isolated from our enemies. The very liberty and way of life that we cherish so much is viewed by our enemies as vulnerability that can leave us open to attack. These principles that we hold dear and the many blessings that we all enjoy enrage many across our ever-shrinking world and compel them to acts of great evil. Although our shores have been safe from foreign attacks since 2001, recent events across the globe remind us that we are still in danger. We must never forget the images of the Twin Towers falling, the crash site in Pennsylvania, and the charred exterior of the Pentagon. This legacy of 9/11 keeps us vigilant. Within days of the attacks of 9/11, the brave men and women of our armed forces were deployed to Afghanistan to hunt down and destroy the elusive enemy that brought death and terror to our shores. That mission is ongoing today across the globe. 17 long years later, many of our neighbors and family members are still in foreign lands, helping to ensure safety at home and democracy abroad. They continue to complete their missions with honor and bravery, and far too many have paid the ultimate price. Let us not forget their sacrifice or the sacrifices of the brave men and women who have served our nation in harm's way during past conflicts. This legacy of 9/11 is one of service and sacrifice above and beyond the call of duty. I will never forget where I was on the morning of September 11, 2001. I don't think any of us that were old enough to understand what happened that day ever will. I was sitting in a law enforcement training class when a staff member came in and directed us to a break room. There was a large television and it was turned in to the unfolding horror. It was right around 9 a.m. and not long after the first tower was struck. The news commentators were trying to make sense of what was happening, and many kept asking the question, was this a horrible accident or a deliberate act of terror? Every one of us in that room full of cops knew that it was no accident. We just stared in silence for some time, each realizing that we were witnessing the dawn of a new world and an attack on the United States of America. Before the end of that horrible morning, over 2,900 civilians, first responders, and military personnel would be dead. The families of those victims may have learned to live with their losses, but they and our nation will never forget. This legacy of 9/11 is one of pain, loss, and suffering on a national level. And finally, I'd like to speak of the legacy that is probably closest to the hearts of those assembled here today. On that bright September morning in New York City firefighters, New York City police officers, Port Authority officers, federal officers, 8 private rescuers, and countless civilians made the ultimate sacrifice doing what we all do every day. I remember watching them on live television, feeding into the first and then the second burning tower. They moved and performed without hesitation, just as they had been trained. They hauled their gear, tended the injured, and led the terrified to safety. Their radios crackled with traffic amid the alarms of spent air packs, much as I've heard on thousands of calls that I've been on right here in Manatee County, many of them with many of you. As I looked at their faces, looking up at the burning towers as they marched towards them, it occurred to me that they were scared, but none wavered. I believe they knew, as I did watching, what was going to happen. They still went into the towers and up those stairs, dragging hoses, talking on their radios, and calmly communicating their response from one floor to the next. As I watched, I knew many of those responders would die, and I'm sure that they did too, as they walked into the apocalypse. To me, this is the greatest legacy of all from 9/11. It's a legacy of heroes, extreme bravery, and selfless sacrifice to others. May my career in service to this community be a worthy tribute to their sacrifice that horrible morning. God bless each and every one of you.
Next, we have Denise Evers, 911 operator, City of New York. I gotta say Brooklyn, right? There you go. Okay.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Mayor Poston, Mayor Groover Bryant, distinguished guests, family, and friends. I am very humbled to speak with you today. My name is Denise Evers. I am a retired FDNY dispatcher, a former fire alarm dispatcher for the City of Boston, and a retired registered nurse with a background mostly in emergency medicine. I am married to one of the greatest men to walk this earth, Richie Evers, a retired FDNY fireman with 20 of his 30 years at Rescue 2 in Brooklyn. You know I'm going to hear about this tonight. On 9/11/2001, I was to leave from JFK Airport at 1 p.m. for an emergency nursing conference in Orlando. I had been working in a level 1 trauma center on Staten Island. Richie had retired in June of 2001. He woke me up, said, "Look at the TV." We watched the replay of the plane hitting the tower, and he said, "This is terrorists." He got up and said, "I need to go to the firehouse." He grabbed his pre-packed Task Force 1 bag, which held enough to be self-sustaining for 3 days, and he started out the door. That was the only time I ever tried to hold him back. I was left standing in the doorway, not knowing what to do next. I got dressed and I went to the emergency department where I worked. My boss was happy to see me. She asked me to set up decon in the parking lot of the hospital, which I did, and we saw somewhere over 100 people. I really don't remember what the number is. About 5:30 that night, I was paged for a phone call. I went to the nurse's station and I picked up the phone. It was Richie. He said, "I'm home and you need to come home." He said, "Everyone is dead." I said, "What does that mean, everyone is dead?" He started to say names: Ray, Billy, Timmy, Pete, Kevin, Eddie, Patty, and then I yelled, "Stop, stop, I can't hear anymore." My legs started to give out and my boss pushed a chair on wheels under me. I said I was on the way. My boss had someone drive me home. I don't even remember who it was. For the next several months, we attended a memorial, a wake, or a funeral every day, with very few exceptions. Of the 343 firemen that were murdered, 15 were from Rescue 2, either currently or previously. Rescue 2 is one of the 5 rescue companies in FDNY. There is 1 per borough. They are the elite of the elite. They are who is sent in when the firefighters are in trouble. All 5 rescues responded that day. My relationship with Rescue 2 started prior to Richie. As a dispatcher, I came to know a lot of guys on the job. 43 of them were murdered that day. A lot of people don't even know 43 guys, and the ones I knew were now all dead. Please don't misunderstand. I am the most blessed person I know. We all have stories, we all have triumphs and tribulations. This part of history that changed me, those I know and love, changed this country and indeed the world. I would like to ask you all to find a way to never forget. In hindsight, it took about 5 years before we actually began to realize the enormity of the event. Not only were the murders horrific, but the devastation to so many families and friends, neighbors, and colleagues. Everyone, and I mean everyone, was affected. In a city the size of New York, that's an extraordinary number. The other piece of this is the kindness, support, and patriotism shown in the aftermath of this cowardly act. We had started building our home in Bradenton in June of 2001. When 9/11 happened, we had been getting construction updates every Friday by phone. These updates became the only good news that was incoming, even though at the time we really could have cared less. We no longer wanted to leave New York. Everyone we knew was suffering. But the Friday phone calls were waited for by the whole firehouse. They started calling our new house the Rescue Resort, and it became something good to look forward to. The builder put an American flag on our lot. They took care of everything and told us not to worry. The house was finished in November of 2001, but we had to sell our New York home in order for this to work, and nothing was selling in New York at that point. The bank said, "Don't worry, we'll keep you on the construction loan until it's sold." Who does that? We were from New York. We had never seen anything like this before. Before we even got to Bradenton, we started to fall in love with it. While attending a memorial service for Jonathan Ielpi, the son of a Rescue 2 fireman, Lee, and his wife, Ann, we found several members from the Bradenton Fire and surrounding departments in attendance in New York to bring a donation to the Widows and Children's Fund. It was so ironic to us because we had never even heard of Bradenton, Florida. Yet here we were building a house here, and here these fellows are in New York and meeting us along their journey. This service today, held almost every year on 9/11 in Bradenton, has more meaning to more people than most of you will ever realize. For me and my New York family, it is healing. It is acknowledgement of an event that changed us, our lives, and our future. I went through a basket that I had thrown some things into during that time and have never looked at until last week. I found a few prayer cards and memorial programs left over, and I invite you afterwards to take one home to help you remember. Please continue to support this memorial and understand the help you are giving to so many of us. Having said that, I would like to conclude by reminding you that 9/11 is indeed still an open event. There are people dying today from the effects of the remains of the Twin Towers. There are families dealing with the illnesses of that day and the days that followed. There are deaths to come, and they will outnumber the original 3,000 murders of that day. Please also remember all of the service men and women whose lives this event has shaped, changed, and even taken away. This, my friends, is why never forgetting is so important. Thank you.
Aaron White, EMT, Manatee County EMS.
Good morning, everyone. This is my inspiration story inspiration from devastation. My name is Aaron White. I'm an EMT here at Manatee County EMS. I would like to share with you on this day of remembrance my personal accounts of September 11th, how those events forever changed my life. It was September 11th. My day started off just like any other. I woke up around 5:30 in the morning, started breakfast for the kids. My wife, who was pregnant, wasn't feeling well, so I was going to see the kids off and then go to work. That was the plan. I was not working in the medical field at the time and had no plans to do so. While getting things ready for the kids, it happened. I turned on the news and saw the report of a plane crashing into the North Tower of the World Trade Center buildings. Details were unknown at this point, but most reported the crash has been an accident. With the kids off to school and my wife feeling a little better, we sat down to try to have some breakfast before I was to head off to work. She asked me about the report of the plane crash on the news, and just as I was starting to tell her what happened, the second plane struck the South Tower. We were shocked and speechless as I witnessed this act of terrorism, the beginning of the day we would all come to know as 9/11. This is the day that surely all of us will remember clearly. But for my wife and I, it was the day our son would be born. And immediately after the second strike on the World Trade Center towers, her water broke. Now, while I'm just like any other American coming to grips with the reality of this morning, we began our panic trip to Blake Medical Center. I'm headed to the hospital so my wife can give birth to my son. Our country is under attack. Air Force One is flying over my house with fighter jets escorting it. President Bush was visiting school children at Booker Elementary when the attacks occurred, and so he departed on Air Force One. Seeing Air Force One take off with fighter jets escorting, I remember wondering if his plane was even under attack that day. Once I arrived to the maternity ward, the entire staff is in shock, just as we were. To their credit, they maintained a high level of professionalism, but still there was this unspoken feeling of dread and terror as we all shared. I was trying my very best to concentrate on the birth of my son, but could not help from watching the news coverage. Now, shortly after arriving to the labor and delivery at Blake, I witnessed New Yorkers running for their lives. It was complete pandemonium as South Towers collapsed into the street. My wife's contractions grew by each passing moment. The world now realizes that everyone unevacuated in the tower, employees of the tower, law enforcement, firefighters, and paramedics who ran into the doomed building to perform search and rescue are all now dead. My wife's labor continued, and she gave birth to our son. It was at this same moment, the world watched in utter disbelief the collapse of North Tower. Holding our newly born son, I was left with the unforgettable memory, this graphic image of brave men and women who responded, who entered the building knowing this would be their last call they respond to, willfully sacrificing their lives to save others. I'll never forget. The memory of those events of that day, unforgettable to all, were magnified by the difficulty of trying to deal with the feelings of that horror and sadness while celebrating the new life that was given to us that day. Our son, DeAndre White. The combined emotions of that day, the memory of that day left the memory more deeply engraved and personal for myself. It was this tragedy which inspired me to begin my career in Manatee County EMS. I have not stopped developing in my career to better serve our people. I'm a member of our SABRE team and have since gone on to the Fire Academy and am now a proud member of the Parish Fire Department as a reservist. Throughout my career, it has been my goal to serve my community with excellent patient care, to get involved in my community, and try to make a difference in this world post 9/11, even if marginal in comparison to those heroes that paid the ultimate sacrifice. 17 years ago today, the attacks on our country implored me to engage in my civic duty and to serve this community and to help my fellow citizens as best ways I can. Those events and my subsequent career here at Manatee County EMS has taught me to value every moment of life. Make the most of those moments, large and small, and take nothing for granted. In my time here, like the time of my peers who entered this service in the shadows of 9/11, I've been guided by the great leaders of Manatee County EMS, the experience of my co-workers who came before me, and by the legacy of those heroes whose sacrifices we celebrate here now. As I've traveled this journey of civil service, this service is my duty. But this duty I recognize as the highest honor and privilege. I am thankful for all of the opportunities to serve this community I have been blessed to receive, and for the great company I have had the distinct pleasure of serving with along the way. I would like to conclude in thanking everyone in attendance, and let us remember the men and women who paid the ultimate sacrifices on that day, and may God bless their souls. Thank you. Before I go, would you come up? This is my son, DeAndre White. Of course, today is his birthday, and I would ask that we all stand and sing happy birthday to him. He's gonna kill me later. Happy birthday to you. Cha cha cha. Birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Andre. Happy birthday to you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
DeAndre attends MSA and has plans to serve in the U.S. military upon graduation.
I guess you should never challenge your parents that they cannot embarrass you. At this time, I would like to bring up Bob Mikulski, East Manatee Fire Rescue Training Officer.
Good morning. I'm Bob Mikulski, Training Officer with East Manatee Fire Rescue. First of all, I'd like to say it's an honor and a privilege to be a member of the 9/11 Committee for another year and to represent the individuals that have made the ultimate sacrifice in 2017. In 2017, there were 93 line of duty deaths. The state of Florida had 3 line of duty deaths. James Dorminey, Reedy Creek Fire Department. Stephen Terry, Hernando Fire Rescue. Jeffrey Atkinson, Tallahassee Fire. In Manatee County, we would like to recognize the passing of some of our members. Former Fire Commissioner James Malley, East Manatee Fire Rescue. Retired firefighter Edward Wadlinger, East Manatee Fire Rescue. Retired firefighter John Layden, Cedar Hammock Fire Rescue. And shall we never forget Manatee County's only line of duty death, Brian Reed, West Manatee Fire Rescue.
Presidential proclamation, the Manatee County Emergency Communications Center invites all public safety personnel to observe a moment of silence in remembrance of the victims of the September 11th terrorist attacks in 2001. County Emergency Communications Center pauses to remember those 93 fire personnel lost in the line of duty nationwide during 2017, including James Dormady, Stephen Terry, and Jeffrey Atkinson from the state of Florida. We also remember the passing of former Fire Commissioner James Malley, retired firefighter Ed Waldinger, retired firefighter John Layton, and we remember and honor the line of duty death of firefighter Brian Reed in 2001. May the road rise to meet them, may the wind always be at their back, and may the Lord hold them in the palm of his hand until we meet again. KMTM 569, Manatee County Fire Radio.
And now at this time, we have a dove release, and I'd like to call representatives from each family. From the Malley family, I would like to call Jay Malley's granddaughter, Brittany Ryden. Ed Wadlinger's representative is going to be Chief Lee Whitehurst, East Manatee Fire. John Layton's representative is going to be Billy Smith, Cedar Hammock Fire Rescue. The symbolicness of the doves is to bring faith, hope, and happiness. As they release their doves, they will fly solo for a few minutes until they send the rest of the doves up. The rest of the doves represent the people that have passed prior that are going to escort them to their never-ending home.
Next, I would like to bring up Pastor Stan Pankovich, Cedar Hammock Fire Rescue, for the benediction.
Well, let's go ahead and bow our heads. Well, Father, as we leave here today reflecting on the lives that were sacrificed on 9/11, help us to never forget their sacrifice, their courage, their selflessness. Help us to remember how fragile life is, and help us to never take our lives for granted. Protect those that are on the front lines even as we speak in foreign countries, protecting the freedom that we're experiencing today. I pray, Father, you give our leaders wisdom, that they would make choices that would prevent another day like 9/11. May we leave here with a renewed commitment to each other, to our community, and to our God. We pray these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.
In closing, when you leave today in remembrance, I would like for you to at least take a moment of your day and remember the mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters, police officers, firefighters, flight crew, flight attendants, and all that made the ultimate sacrifice on this given day. Also, when you leave today, about a year ago today, around this time, Manatee County, Sarasota County, half the West Coast was preparing for what could have been a devastating blow to our area. I want to say we caught a God wink that day and the storm moved on our behalf. I don't know that the people in North Carolina would be as fortunate as we were last year. So with that in mind, a prayer for those folks and hope that everything turns out for them. Again, we thank you for taking time out of your day to attend our ceremony, and this concludes the ceremony. Thank you.